Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. On Monday, I did a look at the New York Giants roster on the offensive side of the ball, went position by position to look at whether or not the Giants were better on offense at each position. So today, I thought we would go and look at the defense. Please, if you haven't watched it, go back and look at the Monday show where I judged each position, where I think the Giants are going to be better on offense. Although really the biggest change on offense for the Giants is the change at quarterback. Not as many changes on offense as there are going to be on defense in 2025. But go back and give that show a watch as well. And so with that said, let's get into the defensive unit. And what we'll do, we'll go position by position, and I'll start with the defensive line. Giants, of course, have Dexter Lawrence, one of the best defensive linemen in all of football, maybe the best defensive lineman, but a guy who might not get full credit for that simply because the Giants haven't been good the last couple of years. But the reality of it is the Giants traded away Leonard Williams in the middle of the 2023 season. At the end of the 2024 season, they lost Sean Robinson, who had signed a one-year contract with the Giants. They lost Robinson, a really good run defender, solid veteran player. They lost Robinson in free agency. And in 2024, Joe Schoen and the Giants didn't add anything to the defensive line. They depended on late round draft picks, DJ Davidson, Jordan Riley. They fortunately found undrafted free agent Elijah Chapman, who became a useful pass rusher and a fan favorite, because he's a smaller guy, 5'10", 5'11", 280 pounds maybe. But once Lawrence got hurt, they were relying on Davidson, Riley, Chapman, guys they picked up off practice squads like Elijah Garcia, Corey Durden. And a guy like Rakeem Nunez Roches, who is really a 10, 11-year veteran in the league, should be a rotational defensive tackle, guy that should play maybe a third of the snaps on defense. And last year in his 10th season, I think he played, more than 60% of the snaps, played a career high in snaps. And that's just too much for a guy like Nacho. That exposes him, overplays him, and is not beneficial to him really, really, being at his best when he is on the field. To Joe Schoen's credit this offseason, he really attacked the defensive tackle problem that the Giants had in going out and getting some help for Dexter Lawrence. Giants made a big signing with Chauncey Golston from the Dallas Cowboys. Love that signing by Joe Schoen. Shane Bowen, Giants defensive coordinator, when he was in Tennessee, he had a guy named Danico Autry, really good player, veteran defensive lineman. Played the Leo or Rio position, a defensive end, sometimes standing up, sometimes with his hand in the ground. And that's a position that Bowen relied on in Tennessee. Giants really didn't have a guy who fit that description last year. Chauncey Golston can do that. Golston can fill that Leo role that Bowen had in Tennessee. He can play, as a down lineman, at 278, 280 pounds. He can play a tackle on occasion. He can play the 5 tech. He can occasionally stand up. He can be used in a lot of the ways that Wink Martindale used to use Jihad Ward with the Giants. But I think, Golston is a better player than Jihad Ward. So that for me was an excellent signing. Giants drafted Darius Alexander in the third round out of Toledo, a young man who spent 6 years at Toledo, should bring some juice to the pass rush, should really help the interior of the Giants' defensive line, as they rebuild that depth. Shane also signed a couple of quality, veteran players who may not be, huge impact guys, but who can be rotational pieces, who are experienced, who should be able to defend the run and who should help the Giants. Those guys are Roy Robertson Harris and Jeremiah Ledbetter. Giants also still have, younger players, Elijah Chapman, Davidson, Riley, competing for spots at the end of the roster. And, the going all the way back to Dave Gettleman, the Giants used to talk about building a deep rotation on the defensive line, being able to come at the offense in waves. And they've never really built it, the way that the Philadelphia Eagles have managed to build it, the way that some other teams have managed to build it. And this feels like the closest that the Giants have come. This feels like the deepest defensive line with Lawrence, with Alexander, with Golston, with Roy Robertson Harris, with Raheem Nunez Roches, with a half a dozen guys that they should be able to rotate in and play, hands in the ground, defensive tackle, help against the run. Maybe the Giants won't be exposed quite as much, when Dexter Lawrence isn't on the field as they were at times last year. So for me, defensive line definitely better than it was a year ago. No question about that. Kudos to Joe Shane for recognizing a problem that he didn't address a year ago, that he didn't do enough about. Kudos to him for going out and doing something about that in the 2025 offseason. Should really help the Giants' run defense, should help the pass rush simply in the fact that you've got fresher players you coming in and out. You've got more talent, with guys who are playing with their hands in the ground, and Darius Alexander and Chauncey Golston should be a really good thing for the Giants in 2025 and perhaps going beyond that as well. Let's look at the edge position. And of course, I'm going to grade edge. We'll just say up front, I'm going to grade edge as better than it was a year ago. You have Kayvon Thibodeau and you have Brian Burns, of course, who are a quality duo to begin with. And then, of course, the Giants were able to draft Abdul Carter out of Penn State, number 3 overall, best pass rusher in the 2025 draft. Should really be a huge benefit to the Giants. Guy that can play multiple spots, give you the freedom to move Thibodeau around, move Burns around, move him, they can move Carter around. You can play Carter as a wide 9 defensive end in pass rush situations. Go back and look at his tape from Penn State. And perhaps that was the thing that Carter did best, was come off the edge in pass rush situations as a wide 9 defensive end. And, again and again and again, when I watched the young man's film, when he was lined up as a wide 9 defensive end with his hand in the ground, he was virtually impossible for the right tackle on the opposing team to handle without any help. So we'll see how the Giants figure out that rotation. But, of course, the Giants lost Azeez Ojulari in free agency, but losing Ojulari and gaining Abdul Carter is a net plus, no question about it, no doubt about it. So this is another position where the Giants are better in 2025 than in 2024. And that means the front seven, the most important part of their defense. You talk about trenches, you talk about winning games in the trenches, losing games in the trenches, winning at the line of scrimmage. This front defensive seven, the ability to rotate guys, the ability to use different packages. This front seven, if these guys, if Darius Alexander plays the way that he can, that the Giants hope he will, if Chauncey Golston has the impact they hope he will, if Abdul Carter is the player that the Giants think they drafted, if Kayvon Thibodeau plays up to capability, if Brian Burns continues to play the way that he did a year ago, this front seven for the New York Giants could be a deep one, could be a special one, and could make this defense a top half of the NFL defense in 2025. So that's two positions down, two positions where I think the Giants are better. All right, let's look at inside linebacker, which is, of course, part of that front seven. Starters there, Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden. And again, you have an interesting situation here at the inside, or what a lot of people commonly now refer to as the off-ball linebacker position, because of Abdul Carter and because of the fact that until his final year at Penn State, Abdul Carter was an inside linebacker. Giants drafted him because of what he can do on the edge. Carter himself prefers the edge. I think everybody knows that is where his major impact could come, where he would be best suited to play the majority of the time. Similar to Micah Parsons coming out of Penn State, who played a lot on the inside. Parsons had all of the skills to be a great edge defender. The Cowboys smartly moved him out there, and he has become one of the NFL's best defensive players. Abdul Carter could follow the same path, but with Kayvon Thibodeau, with Brian Burns, there is the possibility that Abdul Carter will line up on the inside on an off-ball linebacker spot. And in combination with McFadden, with Okereke, I'm going to once again say that this is a position group that on paper looks better than it did a year ago. Another factor in that could be Deontay Johnson, who missed a good portion of last year. Young player, really impressive in the preseason. And if you look at it, there may not be a lot of opportunities for Deontay Johnson to get on the field, but he's a guy, a lot of speed, a lot of athleticism, potential coverage ability, and would be intriguing to see if the Giants can find a way to find some snaps for Deontay Johnson as well. So that's three positions down and three positions where I think that the Giants have improved their personnel fairly significantly. Let's turn our attention now to the secondary, and we'll talk about cornerback first. And all you need to know about the Giants' cornerback situation, as far as whether it's better or worse or the same than it was in 2024, is that entering the 2024 season, the Giants admitted that they needed Deonte Banks, 2023 first round pick. They needed Deonte Banks to step up and be the number one cornerback, be the shutdown guy, be the guy that followed number one wide receivers in 2024. Obviously, we know that didn't go well for Tay Banks. struggled in that role. He struggled in Shane Bowen's defense, which required less man-to-man, less press coverage than Banks might have preferred to play, than he would have played and did play under Wink Martindale. Banks was drafted to play in a Martindale press coverage man-to-man type scheme, and of course, after what went on between Wink Martindale and Brian Daboll, Wink Martindale was let go by the Giants, and Bowen was brought in, and the scheme changed. And those kinds of things happen in the NFL. You have to be able to do more than one thing to succeed as a player in the NFL. You can't be, if you're a player who can only play one scheme, then you have to be in very specific situations around the league in order to be a good player, in order to be successful. There are certain teams that you can play for, certain teams that you can't. And that's tough. That's a tough way to make a living, tough way to make a career. But all you need to know about the Giants cornerback situation is that when you look at it, as we said, Tay Banks was looked at as the number one corner a year ago. When you look at the Giants cornerback situation now, Tay Banks is looked at as the weak link. You have Paulson Adebo signed in free agency from the New Orleans Saints. Fairly young cornerback. I believe he's 25. Guy who had begun to take on number one cornerback responsibilities with the Saints a year ago before suffering a season-ending injury. Guy who I loved that signing. I had hoped for that signing. We knew the Giants would chase, a number one corner in free agency. I looked at Adebo as the youngest of the top corners, as a guy who was still entering his prime, and I love the signing of Adebo as the Giants' nominal number one corner. He fits well with Tay Banks too, because Adebo is used to playing the left side of the field. Tay Banks has played the majority of his time on the right side. And you would think that what could happen most of the time here is that both of these guys could stay on the sides where they are most comfortable. And that's a nice fit. Then, of course, you have Drew Phillips in the slot, third round pick a year ago, who was outstanding, showed a lot of toughness, showed coverage ability, had an interception or two at the end of the year. A quick note about Phillips. He posted the other day that he had LASIK surgery on his eyes during the offseason. Maybe, just maybe, Phillips never had an interception in 4 years at Kentucky. And the interception that he had at the end of the season, was really his first one at the college or NFL level. Maybe the LASIK surgery, some improved vision, maybe that will help his ball skills, which really is probably the only thing missing from making Phillips a true star as a nickel corner. And, in the fourth corner for the Giants is now Cordale Flott, who was the third starter a year ago, who was the starter on the outside opposite Tay Banks. And I tend to think, Cordale Flott, entering his fourth season, still one of the youngest players on the Giants roster. But Cordale Flott is perhaps better suited as a team's fourth cornerback, as a guy who could be, a rotational piece, in some dime packages, as a guy who could fill in for a game or two in the slot or on the outside, in the event of injury. I think Cordale Flott as a fourth cornerback is an outstanding depth piece. And then, of course, Giants still have Trey Hawkins, sixth round pick a couple of years ago. They drafted Corey Black out of Oklahoma State in the seventh round. So still some young developmental type players, at the back of the cornerback roster. But once again, you look at this position and it's clear that the cornerback room on paper is superior to the one that the Giants had a year ago. The last position, of course, for us to look at is the safety spot. And here again, the Giants made another big free agency move. They signed Javon Holland from the Miami Dolphins to a 3-year contract, roughly $45 million. A year ago, the Giants lost Xavier McKinney a couple of years. And, with Wink Martindale, Jason Pinnock was a really effective player because Wink used him a lot at the line of scrimmage. He used him a lot as a blitzing safety, almost an extra linebacker. Pinnock's athleticism really shone in that role. Last year, Jason Pinnock paired with Tyler Nubin, second-round pick out of Minnesota, as the starting safeties. Pinnock wasn't nearly as effective in Shane Bowen's more zone-oriented, scheme where he wasn't used at the line of scrimmage nearly as often. He wasn't used as a blitzer quite as much. He was asked to play more in a traditional safety, maybe center field, zone coverage kind of role. And he was okay, but he wasn't the impact player that he had been in 2023 with Wink Martindale as the Giants defensive coordinator. This offseason, the Giants and Pinnock went their separate ways. Giants signed Javon Holland, and that should be a massive upgrade in and of itself. Holland, very good player for the Miami Dolphins for the last 4 years, and now a starting safety for the Giants. And the other thing, of course, Tyler Nubin, guy who the Giants were very, very high on a year ago, guy who was a ball hawking, playmaking safety at Minnesota in college, had a pretty good rookie year. But the one thing that was missing for Nubin in his rookie year was the playmaking. He didn't have any interceptions. The big plays weren't there. Maybe a second year in the system, second year in the NFL, year of experience, year of Shane Bowen figuring out what it is that Nubin can do, what it is that he can't do, how to utilize him the best. Maybe that will help Nubin to become the playmaker and the leader at the back of the secondary that the Giants had envisioned when they drafted him. So it's really a clean sweep for the Giants defensively. 5 positions, and across the board, it would appear across the board, the personnel is better. Every position across the board, the personnel on the defensive side is better. And the big question, of course, is going to be defensive coordinator Shane Bowen. There was some gnashing of teeth in the fan base. There was some gnashing of teeth in the media about Bowen a year ago, maybe not utilizing his personnel in the best way at times, maybe not being flexible enough to adapt to the personnel that he had. And there's probably some truth to that. Bowen came from the Tennessee Titans, where he had worked with Mike Vrabel. They had a system that they employed. They did things a certain way. Bowen brought that system to the Giants. It didn't 100% fit players like Tay Banks. Bobby Okereke was a little bit lost in that system at times, unsure whether he should aggressively attack the line of scrimmage, whether he should hang back and wait for a play to develop. That's something he and I talked about during the season. Jason Pinnock wasn't a perfect fit. And maybe you can fault Bowen for at times not adapting to his personnel. Maybe you can fault him for, while Kayvon Thibodeau, Aziz Ojulari, and Brian Burns were healthy, for not getting Ojulari perhaps on the field enough. I think that the challenge for Shane Bowen is going to be showing the flexibility to utilize all of the chess pieces that Joe Shane has handed him in 2025. Can he find ways to get production out of Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Brian Burns? Can he find packages that get them all on the field at the same time? If and if those packages are taking Micah McFadden or Bobby Okereke off the field, can he get production out of those guys and keep them happy? Those are guys that at this point in their careers, they're used to playing every single snap. Even McFadden, former 5th-round pick, has become a player who has occasionally come out in passing situations, but is used to playing almost all the rundowns. Um, became a really reliable player for the Giants over the past couple of seasons. It's going to be interesting to see who loses playing time, as the Giants figure all of that out. As we said at the top of the show, talking about the defensive line, there's there's 5 or 6 guys now with Lawrence, with Golston, with Alexander, with Nunez Roches, with Elijah Chapman, with Roy Robertson Harris, a couple of the other guys. There's a lot of guys who deserve snaps, who can get snaps, who you can get in and out of games. Uh, how do you put those pieces together? How do you pair those guys? How do you put them in the right spots to succeed? How do you mold a secondary with a couple of new pieces in Javon Holland and in Paulson Adebo, who are good players, mind you? Of course, as we said, they're good players, but how do you build that communication in the secondary? How do you figure out, what coverage schemes, fit your personnel the best? And that is Bowen's challenge for 2025, is to find the best ways to use that personnel. I think Shane Bowen is a capable defensive coordinator. I think that he understands, the John Mara said way back in January that the defense wasn't good enough, that he was tired of watching teams go up and down the field. I think Shane Bowen understands that he's been given a lot of new toys to play with. He's been given a lot of new weapons. His challenge is to be more flexible, is to be more open, is to be more creative in using that personnel. And I think he will be. I will he suddenly morph into Wink Martindale? Probably not. Nobody does. Will he be, the best defensive coordinator in the NFL, the most creative defensive coordinator in the NFL? Probably not. But I do think he understands that he'll have to do some things. He'll have to be creative. He'll have to come up with some ways to get some interesting personnel packages on the field with that front seven, that he might have to be a little more open to playing some press coverage. Both Tay Banks and Paulson Adebo are quality press coverage corners, and it's a shame not to use them that way. So, NFL coaches talk about self-scouting. They talk about looking at film during the offseason. They talk about adjusting and learning their personnel. And if Shane Bowen has done his job this offseason, if he has really and truly studied the personnel that he has, he will find some better ways to employ, some of those secondary pieces, and he will find, ways to creatively use Abdul Carter, to create mismatches, to move guys around, to get, personnel packages on the field that teams have a really difficult time blocking, in certain situations. So it'll be fascinating to see how it unfolds. I'm looking forward to it because, as you can tell from this review, if this group is healthy, I think that Bowen has a number of really good pieces to work with. And I'm excited to see how it all comes together and just how good it can be if it all does come together. All right, Giants fans, as I said, please go back and look at my review of the offense as well. Check out my interview from the other day with quarterback coach Jordan Palmer, who knows Brian Daboll well, from working with Daboll, as Josh Allen, one of Palmer's big name clients, developed as a quarterback with the Buffalo Bills. Go back and check that out as well. And of course, please check out our work at bigblueview.com as we continue to give you as much coverage as we can as the Giants roll through the offseason with OTAs beginning next week. 3 of the 10 OTAs will have media access. I will be at the first OTA with media access, which I believe is next Wednesday. So look forward to our coverage from that. And as always, Giants fans, thank you for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.